Hello, hello. My name is Jordyn, and I'm your host. And today we are joined by a very, very, very special guest. This is our first guest of 2022, and also our first guest that is being recorded. Yay! So, Seika, just tell us who you are. Who are we listening to right now?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. My name is Sekia Brown. I'm a 20-year-old researcher advocating for mental health. Basically, what I do is I run my own independent research initiative that studies how mental health is described across cultures and backgrounds. And it's just been amazing. I've been doing this specific part of my work for the past year, and we've done interviews over 5 continents and over 15 plus countries. And it's just listening to people and how they talk about mental health. And so it's been a good time.
Awesome. Love that. Love that. Yeah, so we're just going to be talking a little bit more about Seika and all that she has done over the years, whether that be high school, middle school. We can go even back to elementary school if you want. Yeah, we're just going to talk a little bit more about her and her background with mental health advocacy, and then we'll be moving on to a little bit about how this impacted her personally, because obviously we don't want to have like this little bragging session. Hate that.
Amen, honestly.
Literally. And kind of just what she learned from that sort of experience, because I'm sure she has gained a lot of insights over her time. And lastly, we'll be talking a little bit about bicultural mental health, her bicultural mental health background, because as we know, but you guys don't know as a listeners, she does have a Japanese and English background, which is a little bit of a weird combination, not gonna lie, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Thank you. I know it's a little strange when I tell people, I'm like, yeah, I'm half Japanese, I'm half English. They're like, oh, in America too. And I'm like, yup, don't ask. I have no clue.
A whole bunch of different flavors, but we love it. We love
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
And yeah, so this is Forever Blooming, but of course, as my listeners know, we're going to start a little bit with a Rose Thorn Bud segment. And if you don't know what a Rose Thorn Bud segment is, for all of my new listeners, a rose is a highlight, success, small win, and something positive that has happened today or within the last week. A thorn is a challenge you experienced or something you could use more support with. And lastly, a bud are some new ideas that have blossomed or something that you're looking forward to knowing more about or experiencing. So I'm gonna just back down a little bit, because I'm sure all of my listeners know I've talked about my rose thorn bud all the time, so we're gonna hand it over to Seika. What is your rose thorn bud?
Yeah, I will say that I just flew back into New York today to start school. It's the first 2 weeks are online, we love COVID and all, but flying back here, it wasn't that bad actually. And my roommate picked me up and we did some grocery shopping, and it was just really nice to see her again and just to spend some nice peaceful time. I mean, I know grocery shopping can be kind of stressful for many people, but when you're shopping with a good friend, with your roommate, it's kind of, it was the perfect way to get back to New York. And so that was really nice. I'll say that's definitely my rose. In terms of my thorn and bud, they kind of go hand in hand, not gonna lie. A thorn, I've been talking with my friend Emily recently about kind of the whole struggle of self-love, especially in this kind of work. But bud is her and I are kind of going down this self-love path together. And next week, it has been amazing. I felt like I've been feeling a lot more just content with myself and a lot more happy with myself. And so it's still a struggle, but I see it blossoming. So I'm happy.
Oh wow, I love that you said blossom, because Forever Blooming. Oh my god.
Guys.
Love that. We love the bonding moment. We love the journey that you're going on. Love to see it.
Thank you.
Just to go over my rose thorn bud. Y'all, I've been talking about this for the last couple months, but I'm finally graduating this Friday.
Amazing.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be this Friday for you guys, but 2 days before this episode has released, I am graduating. So when you hear this, I'm graduated. Yes,
congratulations.
We love it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm just super, super excited about that. And I am also doing a graduation speech, and there's going to be a recording, so if you want to look it up, you can. But yeah, that's pretty cool. But a thorn, honestly, this week has been so busy. If you guys are an active member within Forever Blooming, you guys know that we did recently have an event And while it was just like the most amazing event, just everybody coming together, talking about advocacy and all about volunteer opportunities, it was stressful as heck to plan.
I bet.
Yeah, but overall, I guess the Bud is just, I'm excited to I'm looking forward to more events in the future and just meeting more people and networking and just like creating an awesome atmosphere, especially just knowing that this will hopefully expand our organization more and improve it constantly. So yeah, super excited about that.
That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, so we'll just jump right into topic 1. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about Seika. So the first thing we want to talk about and focus on is your policy-focused organization. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and so I actually started working in the field of mental health since I was 15. I just turned 20 this past December. And so it's been about 5 years now. And so the first organization that I ran was when I was a sophomore in high school all the way up until I was a senior in high school. So 15 to 18, I ran a nonprofit organization that focused on mental health policy change and awareness. My team and I, for the 3 years that we were working, we worked in 2 legislation sessions, passing 1 bill. And gosh, it was a crazy experience, I will say. Like, I look back at it and I'm like, there's no way I passed a bill, but hey, my team and I did it. It's one of those things that you just don't soak in. Like, you're never like, oh yeah, I did that. You're just like, what the heck? But yeah, and so we focused on mental health specific policies. The first bill that we worked on was a suicide prevention bill, specifically around funding for high schools across the state in Washington. Sadly, that bill did not get passed. But the amazing thing that came from that was that we were able to have this beautiful experience working with adults, working in the system to get things, attempting to get things done. I think that was very valuable as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, seeing how this goes. And so the bill that we actually did get passed in probably late 2019 was around centering, making student well-being centers across Washington state. So now Washington state school districts all have youth representatives that talk to local representatives about both physical problems, but also mental health problems, and talking what kind of resources they need. So having young people work directly with their local representatives was kind of the focus of that bill. And hey, that got passed. And so I'm super proud of that one. Thank you.
We love it. I especially just admired the fact that you did want to pass a suicide prevention bill, because honestly, that has been such an issue with like growing up and being a teenager. Is those feelings of just confusion, feelings of hurt, very new feelings that are hard to navigate, and just knowing that you were there fighting for it. And even though it didn't get passed, it was mentioned, and people are going to know more about that and be more aware about that, especially adults that were dealing with that sort of issue.
Definitely. Yeah. I think something that's amazing in terms of working in mental health is that even if things don't get, passed or published in a professional setting, it does always move forward in erasing stigma. And I think, that's what my experience was, is that even though we didn't pass that bill, we taught these, adults that this is a serious topic and young people should be part of the conversation. And so I felt like we won one way or another. So I was happy with it.
For sure. And I love the idea of the well-being centers. Like, honestly, that was sort of my issue with mental health. I always felt like it was more of an individual sort of struggle, even though it didn't really have to be. Like, everybody is always trying to like search for help or wanting help, or maybe are afraid to even ask for help, but still wanting to get some sort of help. So knowing that you don't really have to struggle alone, that you can make that sort of change with the sort of local representatives that you did mention, that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so like in high school, what really led me into the field of mental health was that I had a psychology project when I was 15 for my sophomore psychology class. Long story short, we had to make a presentation, present the presentation, and it had to be around like kind of raising awareness or, finding a solution to a problem in high school. And I chose like stress and anxiety. And my principal was like, no, your idea is terrible. And the idea was to have a resource hub. So basically kids can know what resources was available for them. And so I was like, okay. And so I went straight to the representatives. I think, you're going to have some pushback sometimes when you're especially talking to adults, but that's why it was amazing to be able to work with, actual representatives in getting something like this passed.
For sure. And honestly, I'm still kind of bamboozled. Like, how is that not a good idea?
I don't know. It's like the easiest thing to pass. But I mean, look at me. Like, it's the easiest club idea. Like, I wasn't creating anything. I was just showing everyone what we already had. And she was like, no, but
That's
it's okay.
so weird.
We're past that. That was 5 years ago. I'm past that now, I guess. But
it's okay. I'll hold the grudge for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, but honestly, I just want to talk a little bit about how just like not being taken seriously really has an effect, especially as a teenager. I have definitely experienced that in my own life. Sort of looking down on you just because you're a teenager, as if I know that teenagers can be impressionable and teenagers can go through these emotions that they're not entirely aware of how to figure out, but that doesn't mean that their opinions or like thoughts and beliefs are less than others, especially adults, because most of your like core beliefs form when you are a teenager, when you are a young adult. So having that sort of mindset that teenagers don't know what they're talking about is just absolutely flawed.
Yeah I think exactly. When I was working specifically in getting things like that club passed in my high school, there was a lot of pushback because like I was a terrible high school student. They were like, you have no credibility, you have no, you can't even be a good student. Why do we think that you could be a good like club president? And it was kind of discouraging because I was like, this is a great idea, I feel like, and I wanted to at least talk about it. For like example, when the bill didn't get passed, the first bill, I was able to sit down with the legislators and senators that said no, and they helped me realize why it didn't get passed. They helped me look at exactly, and like that's why I was happy that I was able to build this connection. That even though they said no to the bill, they weren't saying no to the idea. They were saying no to the specifics, the little faulty details that were not there. And so that was a lot more genuine than having my principal just be like, no, screw you, you're not gonna have a club. And like it's a matter of like you said, teenage years are the years where you learn the most. And there is a huge difference when you have an adult that just completely shuts you down and you have an adult that kind of helps you walk through the process. It's a completely different like learning process.
Absolutely. And really just centering on that sort of, low GPA means you're not trying, you're not a good student, you're not competent at all. I hate that. Like, as you said, if you work with the students individually and try to help them learn, if you try to help them get through these complex times, it's most likely going to be more effective than just completely being shut down. Because if you think that low GPA students are just these troubled kids, they're going to be more troubled if you're going to just say, no, you're stupid. Go away.
And I was really lucky because like I graduated high school with a 2.6 GPA, probably like 1100, less than 1100 SAT score. And I go to Cornell University now, which is an Ivy League institution. And so it's a complete, it's a complete, opposite what you would think of for a student going into Cornell or like a really high, institution and universities. But what mattered was that I had this idea and there was someone that was willing to listen to it and foster that idea versus someone that shut it down. Not only did my principal shut down my idea, they didn't even offer me help in becoming a better student. I became a better student when I began to take the things that I cared about more seriously and when other people took them seriously too. Like, as long as you're passionate about something, it will go far, but it helps when you realize that there's people that care about what you're passionate about. And so you see that differences in adults all the time, but I guess you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, literally, quite literally. And just talking a little bit more about that sort of transition between like your high school years, how do you act out your mental health advocacy now, knowing that you are 20 years old in college? Oh, did you?
not the 20. Like I'm still processing that I'm 20 now. That's insane. I don't feel like I know it's very young by all means, but I hear it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 20.
Okay, my bad.
No, don't apologize.
This grandma over here. No.
No, honestly. But yeah, coming into college, I focused my organization for those 3 years in high school around policy, which was really exciting and it was a great experience. I find it really difficult being completely genuine all the time in politics for many reasons. And I kind of strive myself off of the person of being genuine in every setting that I go to. The same way I talk to you is the same way I talk to my friends, the same way I talk to anyone, which some people say is disrespect, but at the same time, I feel like it's respectful. You know what I mean? I will respect you enough to just care about everyone the same way. You know what I mean? And so coming into college, I think when you go into university, it's a lot of, or even graduate high school, it's a lot of self-reflection. And that does kind of come into my personal background of coming from this bicultural household, being half Japanese and half English. I became really aware of how my culture really affected my perspective on mental health. And so while I appreciated policy, I kind of wanted to dive into that research idea of how does culture affect mental health. And so coming into college last year as a freshman, I disbanded my old organization. Like I had friends that were going to the Navy, friends going to, you know, across the world for colleges. Like it was not appropriate to bring this out of there. And so I founded my new organization, which is the one I mentioned when I introduced myself. And it's kind of really just based around having young leaders do global research around mental health and kind of showing people that we're not here to help you, we're here to listen. I will not say I have the next best solution. I won't go interview someone from another country and say, let me tell you what you need to do to fix yourself. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like learning to sit back and learn from them and listen to them and see their experiences and trying to present a new solution. So it's been a really fun time this past year in college, just being able to kind of do this global research.
Love that. My first immediate thought, even though it was like completely just random off topic, when you were talking about I'm not going to tell you what to do, even though you're from a different culture, from a different setting, my first thought was just like American colonialism.
No, exactly though. That's exactly what I was worried about. Like I want to learn. I think especially as like, in this day and age where we have so much technology, we have so much unification now in the things that we do. I think it's equally important to talk about the people that, you know, is working with us or that we're hearing about. Like we should learn about people's cultures. I'm not saying we should adapt them into our lives. I'm saying we should be aware of them. We should recognize that there's differences and just be okay with that. And so the last thing I would want to do is come in and be like, I'm English. This is bad. Like if I come in and I'm like, hey, like, let me tell you what's up. Like, that's the last thing I want to be. And so it's been like I'm hyper aware of that because it's super important. Talking about cultures is important, but I don't want to dictate another person's culture. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And honestly, that kind of just reminds me of this class that I took in college. Well, not in college, but this college class that I took in high school. I'm getting ahead of myself.
I mean, hey, you're graduating, might as well get there.
Literally. But I took this anthropology class, and just everything that you're talking about is reminding me of this class. And I absolutely am such a nerd for anthropology.
Yes,
I love it.
Amen. I'm actually minoring in anthropology. A lot of this work that I do right now in the global research field is it kind of falls under this medical anthropology. It's learning about people's kind of like cultural medicine in a way. You know, there are spiritual ways that they treat depression or things like schizophrenia. Like you see totally different medical practices in treating mental health or addressing mental health. And so there's been a lot of medical anthropology touching into my work, which is super exciting. I'm loving it.
I love that. I always just thought of like people actually, like I watched this whole documentary about this woman who is an anthropologist. I really don't remember the documentary. I wish I could tell you so you could watch it because it's amazing. But it was just this woman visiting different countries and just trying to learn about their cultures in order to effectively combat climate change and everything like that. Wow. And their sort of ways of doing it. And even though she was not directly, again, instructing them on what to do, she was taking these tips and gathering these tips in order to find like this holistic way to combat climate change. And that's pretty much how I see your research from that sort of perspective. I love it.
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm going for. Is that, you know, I think mental health is such a big thing now, and it's becoming such a big thing. And before we get messy about how do we treat it globally, I think it's good to hear the tips and recommendations from people and then come back, you know, with an actual professional that can address it and learn what to do with that information. So that's definitely what I'm looking at.
Oh, do you actually want to see that happen in the future with like somebody looking at all your research and like actually figuring it out?
Yeah, that would be great. Like, I don't think I'm personally like I'm a sophomore in university in my undergraduate year. I mean, maybe I will be that person down the line, but I don't think I'm that person right now. And I think there's a lot more qualified individuals that are specifically in this field that could probably look at the statistics and the data more clearly. Basically what we're doing with this project, YLG, is that we're doing these interviews, and at the end of them, we're going to analyze and look at the similarities and differences between these countries and these cultures and see where is their global overlap and where is their cultural difference. And just learning and accepting and just kind of looking at that in a widespread view, and hopefully maybe publish a research paper about it. But that's kind of a long-term goal.
Love that. Awesome. So I think we're just going to switch gears a little bit now that you guys know more about Seika and what she has done, what she is currently doing. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about how this personally has affected you and what you've learned. Share all the insights for everybody to learn from you.
Right. Yeah, like I said, what really led me to do cultural research was coming from my background itself. And having my mom come from Japan and my dad coming from England, you see these very different views on mental health and how we talk about mental health. I was 8 years old when my brother attempted suicide. And so we had to learn as a family, how do we address this problem, both within America, but also within my parents' own personal viewpoints of what mental health is. And so I think by doing this, I was able to look back in my life and give my parents a lot of grace, and realizing that their perspectives around mental health isn't right and it isn't wrong. It just is, right? That's just whatever it is for them. And it's not my place to say if that's correct or not. I think it taught me, to sit back a little bit and just to be humbled and just listen. And I think personally, it's helped me be a better friend. It helped me be a better daughter, a better sister, just because I'm learning that we all define mental health differently. And because of that, I'm able to look at my friends, I'm able to look at my parents and be like, that's how they process it. And just because I wouldn't process it the same way doesn't mean that isn't good for them. And I think it's been really helpful in building genuine connections just in my personal life, that I'm able to just yeah, that makes sense for them. And I love that. As long as they're well and living a good life, then that's all that matters. So I feel like that's the main thing that I've learned, but yeah.
I love that. Honestly, that sort of understanding that people process things differently is what really leads to empathy with people, because a lot of people will just stick by their own mindset and think that everybody else is wrong, but you really have to consider just the background. I can definitely say that, especially with coming from my own background, knowing that my mother views mental health differently than I do, there was a lot of clash. For example, I'm a very, very feelsy person. I will feel it and deal with it and then move on. But my mother is a kind of just I'll deal with this, emotions later. But really that has, again, just helped her cope with those situations that she dealt with. And this has definitely helped me grow personally. And they're very different. I don't exactly agree with all the things that she does, but it has led her to be the person that she is. So I can't say it's wrong, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, exactly. I think something that really helped me is that especially having both my parents come from really drastically different backgrounds. I'm still equally as English as I am Japanese. I'm split down the middle, and those are both of my cultures, but it's different because I'm not fully one or the other. And so learning and giving grace to my parents in process was giving grace to me, because I, of course, adopted some of my parents' beliefs without knowing it as a child. And I grew with that. And so kind of understanding oh, okay, this is where this part of my mind comes from. And this is where this part of my mind comes from. And be this makes a lot more sense. It doesn't mean I'm happy with it, but I understand myself a lot better by listening to other people talk about themselves too. And so it's been, like I said, it's been really good to just sit back and kind of hear their people's stories and hear just how people experience and define mental health.
For sure. I think learning to listen, as I said, that sort of understanding that everybody processes things differently can lead to empathy, but also learning to listen and really process that as well. Something that I struggle with, not gonna lie, when it comes to just this is why I always tell people I would be horrible at debate. I honestly admire people that are in debate class, because I'm the type of person that's just yes, I have this standpoint and I see flaws in your argument and they're wrong, but I don't know how to explain why they're wrong because
Right.
this is my argument. So it's like, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I was in high school, right, I was this very ambitious, stubborn 15-year-old that, you know, saw a problem that was going on, and I wanted to see things, you know, get better. And so I would demand change. And I think it's good, you know, especially at a young age, I say if you're in high school, especially, utilize your youth in the terms of like being able, you know, you're still really young, but you're still really intelligent. You're able to use your youth as a way to help others. And I think that is beautiful. But I think as I came into college and I came, like, you know, there's not much of a difference between the, you know, the years, but as I came into college and I came into this more global perspective, I realized that I've demanded people to listen to me this past 3 years in high school. I would make testimonies, I would make speeches, I would ask people to listen to whatever I'm saying. And I realized how thankful I was that I was able to be like heard. And I realized I now have the ability to listen to others. I can make people feel the way I once felt. And I think that was the biggest thing too, is that learning to kind of give back what I once demanded and like kind of flipping the script and learning to sit back and just listen.
For sure. And definitely listening and being heard is something that is a very, very powerful thing. I know, especially like as somebody who goes to therapy, knowing that my therapist can understand sort of where I'm coming from, and just knowing that I can just vent without any sort of judgment is very, very powerful thing. And I'm wondering, how does that sort of kind of play a role in just your experience with interviewing others about their own experiences?
Yeah, I think it goes, you know, two directions, but ultimately comes back together. I will have some amazing interviews with these really, you know, lively people that are loving their life. And it's really encouraging to hear, you know, just people, you know, talk about mental health and be so passionate about it. And you can see them love it. And like that love is so radiating. But at the same time, there's conversations that I have and interviews that I do with people who have like really, you know, they're talking to me and you can tell how sad they are, or you can tell how, you know, they're not, you know, they're in their low, you know, they're in their thorn.
Oh my God, their thorn.
Exactly. But, you know, I think what I've learned the most about both the hard stories and the great stories is that they're both equal. I think it's beautiful because all these stories that I'm hearing from people, that, you know, their perspectives. There's this girl I interviewed and she was telling me about the hardships in her family life and losing basically everyone in her family and having to move to another country. But she told, you know, this really, you know, saddest story with a smile on her face, laughing throughout it. And you could just like, that is so beautiful. She wasn't saying that she was happy because of her situation. She was saying that there's still love in the world. She was saying that there's still good things. And that is what she's going to look at over than looking at all the bad things too. So I think, you know, it's both a slap in the face, and it's also like really like, wow, like there's people out in this world that really struggle. And in these interviews, there's not much I can do to help them. You know, there's not much. I'm just sitting, you know, in front of a computer, you know, with someone across the world. Like there's not much I can do as a, you know, 20-year-old, 19-year-old at the time. But what I can do is just give them the space to talk about it, because that doesn't exist everywhere. And I think it's just really encouraging to hear people's story and hear people like look at them and realize that they're relieved at the end of it. They're like, this is my life and I'm proud of it, is kind of like a sentiment that is shared across all of the interviews. And I think the world kind of like stigmatizes talking about life as this constantly bad thing, but it's amazing to see people just love life and love the highs and love the lows equally. They don't shame, they're not ignorant to the hardship, but they embrace it. And I think that has really changed my mindset and perspectives on a lot of things that I would personally go through.
Oh, wow. That I haven't even been through these interviews, but now I'm just getting this sort of like boost, like, oh my God, even though I love my life.
Yeah, like exactly. Like it's a matter of like, there was something that I think my brother told me once, is that like loving life doesn't mean you have to love the circumstance that you're in. You're just loving that you're able to live, right? You don't have to love the circumstances that you're facing in this moment or the circumstances that you faced growing up, but you can love the fact that you are here today. And I think that is a beautiful perspective shift that I've definitely embraced the more I've done these interviews.
Absolutely. Oh man. Let me find out. I'm gonna start my own research company. No.
No, go for it. I'm here for it. I am here for this.
Love that. Love that. Really, that is really inspiring, honestly. I do wonder, even though you are listening to the stories and gaining that sort of hope, there also is that sort of underside of like listening to these stories. I know, like, for example, my therapist has a therapist because she has to listen to all of these really, really heavy stories, which of course is very beneficial to unload and have somebody listen from an unbiased perspective. But it can be very, very damaging. It can be very heavy to your own sort of mental health. So how do you cope with that? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, like I think I mentioned, like, I don't ever want to come off as this, ungenuine person. When you work in the field of mental health, you know that every single person in this field is in it for a reason, and it's probably going to be a personal reason. And so the more I do this work, it doesn't mean that I'm, at the perfect mental state. I will do an interview one day and I'm like, I know I should not be doing this, but I'm doing this anyways, and I will leave it. And like, yes, I feel encouraged by hearing this person, but I also just feel like I have my own, life. I have my own story. And sometimes I'm like, I'm listening to all these people, but who is listening to me? And I think what gives me grace a lot of the times and a lot of peace is like my friends they're a beautiful group of people. My high school friend's been with me ever since my freshman year. It's been over 5 years now. And the friends that I have here at college, my roommates, just the people that I know, I spent Thanksgiving with my friend in Pennsylvania, and it was just a beautiful, rejuvenating experience just to be a person. I think it's easy to get lost in these interviews. It's easy to get lost in other people's lives. And so having, people in my life that ground me in being me, that I'm someone outside of the work I do, that I'm someone outside of the beliefs I have, I'm just a person, I think is really comforting. I think that's my main mechanism of coping. But something that I do within their interviews is I don't change who I am. I will be honest with that person. I'd be like, yeah, that's a struggle. This is something that I'm experiencing. If I'm asking people to share their life and their stories, I need to be equally as willing to share mine. And I do my best, especially in the field like mental health. You have to be authentic, because if you're not, then what are you presenting? My mental health, there are days where I'm so tired, I'm so done, I'm so impatient, I'm about to lose my mind. But it's going through those highs and those lows. And sometimes the interviews help, and sometimes it's not that the person's draining, it's just the work is. And I'm a workaholic by habit, and it's not something I'm proud of. I do not recommend it, but I think it's a learning process. I think I'm learning, like I mentioned, in my thorn in my butt, I'm learning to be patient with myself and realize that I'm still a kid and I don't need to have all this figured out. I'm not supposed to know how to handle all of this, and it's not supposed to be all me. And so I think it's been a back and forth of what do I do? And then just taking a step back and be no, this is me, and that's okay. And I love that.
Oh, that deserves a million claps.
I appreciate that.
At the end of the day, I can totally relate with that sort of workaholic aspect.
Right.
And also just realizing that I am more than my work also. But also just being patient and, being vulnerable and honest and authentic. I think a lot of the time when it comes to mental health as well, just as a little side note, there are a lot of companies and people that advocate for mental health, which is absolutely beautiful, absolutely amazing. Yeah. But there isn't a lot of sort of transparency with this sort of own experience, and also this kind of false narrative as if you can just smile and be okay. Right. So I think hearing that you share your own sort of stories within those interviews and knowing that you are being authentic is the most valuable way to spread awareness and alleviate that sort of stigma, starting that conversation, of course.
Exactly. Something that one of my best friends from home, her name is Natalie, and she is the most loving person, one of the most loving people in my life. And when I came back for winter break from New York back to Seattle up in Washington, she was like, you seem a little off, what's going on? And I was like, no, I'm good, I'm just tired. And she kind of slapped me in the face with her words, and she said to me, Seika, I love you, and I don't care if you save thousands of lives, and I don't care if you listen to thousands of lives, if it comes at the cost of your well-being. And when she said that to me, I will tell you, I was like, that makes sense, right? If I neglect myself when I'm talking about mental health, then what narrative am I promoting? What narrative am I talking about here? And so again, just realizing that just because I can do all these things, in that I'm taking away from my own well-being. It's counterintuitive, and it's not doing something good. It's not doing something beneficial. And so those words have stuck with me, let me tell you. But like, she's not wrong at all. Like, if I think, I can take care or listen to all these people, then I'm not doing it for the right reasons. I should be doing it because I like to be listened to, and so does everyone else. And so I think it's coming to that mutual like friendship ability. It's just to be like, yeah, this is life, like, and we can talk about it.
Absolutely. I think that sort of lesson that you can also allow yourself some space. It's also allowing others space to be heard and listened.
Exactly.
Awesome. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just going to do a little bit of a switch again. Absolutely amazing conversation so far, just hearing your experiences and what you learned. Just to dive a little bit more, me, myself, I'm very Black, as you guys can see. And I don't have that sort of bicultural background, and I've always wondered how that sort of experience is, because I know personally with my own experience, just navigating a very white-dominated world as a Black person is very difficult, and I can never imagine how that sort of can play into that sort of biculturality and having those multiple perspectives, especially adding on to the America's part. So it's kind of just like Japanese, English, American. A lot.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I definitely like think that when I was in elementary school and middle school, I didn't really recognize my background that much. I think especially when you're young, like, you can remember a few things that really stuck out to you when people pointed it out, for example, like that you're different. But at the same time, I didn't understand it. I was in a white dominated neighborhood, and I'm white, but I would go home and I would celebrate Japanese beliefs. I would celebrate Japanese culture. I wouldn't go home and I wouldn't celebrate, American culture. I would go home and I would celebrate Japanese culture. But I would go to school and I would celebrate, American culture there. And so it was like this weird dichotomy of like celebrating three different things. And with my dad, he grew up in a military family in England, traveling across Europe. And so he's coming from this strict background, but also like very lenient in life. And so I think what really kind of nailed it in my head was coming to college and realizing like the people I want to spend time with. What circles am I going around? Like, my roommates, they all come from Asian backgrounds, but they also equally embrace me. They are part of a Chinese association here on campus, but it's not like restricted to Chinese people. It's open to anyone really. And they invited me to go one day, and I was like, oh no, like, I'm not, like, they're like, what do you mean you're not? Because you are Asian. And I was like, yeah, but you're right. like I didn't even think about that. I mean, I think it was pretty difficult. My mom speaks pretty much complete Japanese. Especially growing up, she knew my mom and I probably learned English together throughout like my English textbooks and like, as a kid. But it was a lot of learning that I'm equally as Japanese as I am English, and I'm proud to be Japanese and I'm proud to be English. And I think what comes from it is sometimes a lot of guilt, because I know that, especially with my mom, is that I have a lot of things that are given to me in life just simply because of the way I look. And at the same time, I still feel for my community because that is still my community. I think being a mixed culture or bicultural, like coming from a bicultural background, is difficult sometimes because you want to support both sides of your family, but you don't know how to do it sometimes. And I think that's my biggest struggle when it comes into it. And growing up, obviously, I unconsciously suppressed my Japanese identity, but I am a Japanese American woman doing mental health research, and that's something I'm 100% about, like, loving. And I think it's kind of like building your own community for me. But it was definitely difficult growing up. I didn't really understand the differences of culture. I just accepted it because that was my normal.
Wow. I think I definitely relate to, like, as I said, I'm very Black, and navigating that sort of white community, I definitely relate to that sort of sense of, like, realizing or not really realizing that you're different until, like, an older age, especially since Oh, did
Sorry,
you want to
I just remembered something.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I remembered when I was like a senior in high school. It was the summer going into college, and I was sitting around a bonfire at my friend's house, and his neighbor comes out, and we're like talking and stuff, and he asked me for his name, and his neighbor asked me for my name, and I tell him it's Seika, and he's like, oh, like that's too foreign. Let's give you an American name. And I remember sitting there, and like that was like the first time I really, really experienced someone being like, no. And I'm like, I remember like being flabbergasted about that because
oh my god,
even though I suppressed my Japanese identity unconsciously throughout like elementary and middle school, I am very much aware of it now. And that is my name, and you are not taking that away from me. But I just remember that, like you said, like you just kind of like experience something, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know that, especially like I'm not from Africa, but I know that I've spoken to a lot of immigrants from Africa talking about how people have chosen to call them a different name or call them a different nickname just because their name has like 6 syllables or something. You will learn their name.
You will either address me by my name or you will not talk to me.
like literally.
And like there's no shame in asking how to say someone's name. I don't think there's any shame in asking like, oh, like that's a really cool name. Like where did, like, you know, what's its origin? Where it's its background? I think, you know, again, like that's the cultural curiosity that we should embrace and we shouldn't reject. But I think we should also be aware about how we're having these conversations. I'm glad that, like, you know, my mom and my dad, they didn't give me, you know, like a whitewashed name. I'm glad that they gave me a name that is fitting for me. And like, this is who I am. And when people ask about it, I'm able to share my background. I'm able to share my culture. And again, like that's the narrative I think we should be pushing.
Absolutely. I hate that in America there is like this really, really like mainstream idea that we have to force our heritage on other people. We have to force our culture on other people because if you're different, then that's supposedly bad ?
Right, exactly. Like what was I gonna say? Like I have like I'm part of a lot of different groups on campus. And one of them is like this Christian organization that I'm part of. And they're a very embracing group. And I think it's one of the greatest things about that is that people get to share their cultures within a place where people love their faith and is exploring their faith. And like there's people who come in for like Lunar New Year's, and they're able to like give like share it, and we can talk about it, and we can like, you know, experience these things together. And that's not like pushing culture, it's just sharing culture. And I love that dynamic.
Love that. Intersectionality is such a beautiful thing. Absolutely.
That is a beautiful word. Amen. That's beautiful. We love to see it.
Very beautiful. No, but honestly, just knowing that you are different can be very empowering, and at certain times very encumbering, knowing that there are people in the mainstream that think that, oh yes, we are white, so we are going to force white ideals on you. Please.
I know, but like I think as the more I've done global research and global work, the less, you know, I realize that like, no, like white people exist, but so does every other person. And every other person is in these conversations, and every one of these people should be and are respected, right? And so I think that's been the great, like regardless of your background, regardless of your sexuality, regardless of where you come from, that's just you. And we should embrace those things, and just like the same way I was able to learn to embrace my own culture.
Absolutely. Man, I feel like this sort of turned into like a little bit of a rant because
I know, my bad.
No, it's absolutely okay. I can rant about that all day long if I wanted to. Maybe we'll do a future episode on that.
Maybe.
But yeah, I think over time, learning to embrace your own identity, but also knowing that you have to navigate these sort of different communities is very, very odd. It's a very odd experience. Knowing that you have this little corner, like for example, me and you, we did join these clubs. For me, obviously, it was the Black Student Union. And knowing that we had that little community and we were able to just be ourselves, able to be proud of who we are, and then outside of that community, it was kind of just like, okay, we're back to the usual thing. So how do you sort of experience navigating those different communities, especially considering your biculturality?
Yeah, I think it definitely ties in with the research that I do too, is that I think genuineness and authenticity is the two things I constantly strive for. And so regardless if I go and be part of one community or part of the other, like I said, being mixed means I'm both. And that means I'm not going to suppress one side when I'm hanging out with the other, or vice versa. I will just simply be me. And I think that has given me a lot of clarity in my research, is that if I'm talking to another person about their country and their culture and their background, I have to talk to them about mine too. And I think what helps me is that, like, knowing that I am fighting the stigma of having to switch our narrative depending on who we're talking to, when I can remain the same regardless of who I'm talking to, right? Like I won't change who I am when I'm in a club that's specifically around Japanese Americans versus a club where, you know, it's just open to anyone. Like I'm not going to be that person who's gonna perpetuate that narrative. I'm gonna be the person to be like, yeah, I'm gonna be the same person in both of these places because I relate to both of these places. And I think embracing that has helped me in my work and has helped me as a person.
Awesome. I think it's also a very, well, I wouldn't say brave thing to do, because really it shouldn't even be a sort of brave thing. It's kind of like, it's a normal thing. You are from these different cultures and that is what it is. But I feel like, well, at least from my own experience, it was sort of hard to navigate those other communities. Especially, again, talking about that sort of suppression of your identity, knowing that I'm going to be viewed differently in different situations with different people and their different backgrounds. It was very hard to like be proud of who I am and just exist in certain spaces. But of course, over time, I have learned that I am just who I am, and I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. If I'm in an entirely white group, I'm going to talk about Black issues because I can. But yeah, it's definitely complex.
It is. And I think something that I've learned is that if I remain, you know, constant in who I am with every person that I talk to, of course, there's going to be a few outliers where the situation will become awkward and I will feel uncomfortable. But I will walk away from that conversation not feeling uncomfortable about who, like the person I am and where I come from. I will feel more confident and more proud that my character of loving who I am is what is going to show here. And I think loving the character that I have is so important. That I'm like, yeah, you know what? Even though this person has their own beliefs and their own opinions, at least I can remain who I am in the conversations that I have.
For sure. And I think inherently just being who you are in those spaces kind of also impacts change. Knowing that you're, I guess with, I'm going to say white people, but I guess with sort of white people, they're expecting others to, this is very generalized, this is not every white person, of course, but some white people that I've met have spoken to me as if I'm supposed to fit into their own communities, fit into their own groups, and knowing that I can just exist as who I am is kind of like impacting change again, and knowing that I don't have to work around you, I don't have to make you comfortable. So
I think something that I've learned in my cultural work, like kind of doing these cultural interviews, is that the only reason people act the way they act is because they think they have to. You know, I don't think there often is sometimes ill intent, but when people are trying to be welcoming and they're trying to bring you into their community, they don't realize, you know, that's negative sometimes. They don't realize that could hurt. Like, you're like, I appreciate that, but that's not my community. And you want to show that. But you also want to be respectful of the fact that these people are trying to be welcoming to you, but they just don't know how. And so I think that's why having these cultural conversations, doing bicultural interviews with mental health specifically, has given a lot of clarity in that idea, is that, like, most people want to love, and we have taken that away from people through media, through whatever. And I think erasing any pre-existing stigmas or, you know, beliefs or ideals coming into my conversations and my work has helped me realize that honestly, most people just want to love and they're just too afraid and they just don't know how to. and being able to flip that script and be like, no, like, I appreciate you and I love you and I love this
For sure.
has like definitely changed a lot of things.
Awesome. Speaking of which, just thinking about everything we talked about, really just all that you've done, what you've learned, thinking about how your biculturality has influenced this sort of conversation and all that you do. What sort of things are coming next with that? How are you planning on expanding in the future? How are you planning on impacting in the future?
Yeah. I think something that at least 2022, what we're working towards is that we're hoping that these interviews that I'm doing across the world, where I'm like me talking to another person about someone else's culture and vice versa, we're going to try and do small conversation interviews where basically I am training young leaders from different countries to replicate the interviews that I've been doing within their own communities and within their own cultures. And so they can talk to another person that shares their culture and they can have a bigger, more kind of related experience around mental health. And so that's something that we're working towards right now. I have a girl from Tanzania, a guy from India, and another guy from London that is able to kind of help me kind of formulate these conversations. And a girl from Malaysia as well. And I'm very excited to see how these conversations go in more of a local community setting. I'm writing a book, which is exciting. I've written like the first manuscript and I'm going back and I'm editing the second. Don't know when that's gonna come out, but one day. But I think in more of a character, more personality way, I hope and I pray that like I remain, the genuine person that I am in all the conversations that I have. I love what I love and I love what I believe, but I also want to know what you love and I also want to know what you believe. And I think having that mindset is what matters at the end of the day.
Awesome. I am very, very excited to see where you go, especially with the local community aspect. I think that I've had a lot of conversations, like, as a Black person, I can't really relate to all of the Japanese aspects. I can't relate to especially the English aspect. I wish I was from Britain. No, but I think if I had this conversation with another African American, we could definitely dive a little bit more into the sort of stigmas against mental health. So definitely love that. And good luck on your book, of course. Love that.
Thank you. Yeah, and another exciting project that I'm working on, I'm working as a researcher with the Karolinska Institute, which is a medical university in Sweden. And we're leading these big, like, global focus group conversations where we're just having young people across the world talk to each other in a group setting. And so that will be exciting to see how that goes this year as well.
Awesome. Looks like you got big things coming, and I definitely think that this is going to be amazing as far as just like impacting the mental health cause. So
thank you so much.
Of course. Any last words before we close out this episode?
No, I will just say, remain genuine and make sure to listen.
Awesome. Love that. Closing on a good note.
Of course.
Awesome. So just for you guys listening, I do want to close out this episode. Thank you all for coming. Whoa, you guys are not here, but you're here with me spiritually. So I guess that's why I said that. But Thank you all for listening and watching. Going to continue a little bit with the closing remarks. We do have a website that is bloompod.wixsite.com/our.org. It used to be /podcast, but we are rebranding. So now it is /org. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at foreverblooming.org, or Twitter at foreverbloom.org. And you can find Seika at Sekia Brown on IG, aka Instagram. Plus, you can check out our website. It's full of a bunch of more things if you want to learn more about her at sekiabrown.com. Definitely check that out. Support her, of course. And you can find the research, which there wasn't a lot of research, unfortunately, due to the lack of research for Japanese Americans, but that's something to expand on in the future. But the little amount of research for this episode and the transcript for this episode is on our website in our extra section. And you can find our podcast guest form if you want to be on the episode just like Seika, in our episode section if you want to be on our episodes. And
amazing.
You can also find our audience spotlight form where you can ask for advice to be featured in one of our episodes. And you can find our email management@foreverbloompod.org. Please let us know your thoughts, questions, and how we can improve our podcast because we love hearing from you. And be sure to check out fborg.card.co, and that is card with 2 R's, for all of our easy, accessible links. And lastly, drumroll, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and rate us on Spotify, and share with your friends if you enjoyed this episode. And have a great day, afternoon, or night whenever you're listening to this. Thanks for tuning in.